My parents owned a home at 25. I can't even afford rent at 26. Here's why that's not a personal failure. It's a systems design problem. In 2025, the typical age of a first-time homebuyer in America hit an all-time high of 40 years old. 40. Think about that. Your parents were done paying the mortgage by the time they were 40. Meanwhile, the average person today is just starting one. And not because they were lazy, not because they bought too many lattes, but because the machine they were handed is fundamentally different from the one their parents used. And that machine is the entire subject of this video. A guy born in 1965 graduates, gets a job, earns $31,000 a year, and buys a house for around $97,000. He struggles a little. Rates are high, but he makes it work. That house is now worth $420,000. He has a retirement, a pension, and equity he never had to think about. His son, born in 2000, earns $58,000 a year. Rent is $2,200 a month. He needs to save for a down payment on a home that costs close to $400,000 before he can even start building the same wealth his father stumbled into by just showing up. Meanwhile, the interest rate is not 9% from the 80s, and therefore supposedly good, but the house costs 4 times as much. He is not behind because he made bad decisions. He is behind because the difficulty setting changed and nobody updated the rule book. His daughter, also born in 2000, earns $63,000, lives with 2 roommates, has $40,000 in student debt, and gets told by a random LinkedIn post to invest in yourself. So here's the question that's actually worth asking. Is this a discipline problem, or is this a structural problem? We're going to explain exactly how the housing machine works, why it keeps producing the same outcome for different generations, and why most of the advice floating around completely misses the point. Not because the advice is evil, because it's solving the wrong problem. Next, the central metaphor I want you to hold on to for this entire video is a conveyor belt. Not a ladder, not a treadmill, not a game. A conveyor belt in a factory. Your parents stepped onto the conveyor belt in the late 80s, early 90s. The belt was moving at a manageable speed. The products on the belt, houses, stable jobs, retirement security, were close enough to grab. They grabbed one. They held it. The belt carried them forward. By the time they turned 50, they weren't just ahead. They were the product. You stepped onto the belt in 2020, 2022, 2024. The belt is still moving. The products are still on it, but the belt is running at 2.5 times the speed it did in 1990. And the products cost twice as much to reach. You are not slow. The belt is fast, and the people who grabbed products early have every financial incentive in the world to keep the belt running fast, because speed is what makes their asset appreciate. That's it. That's the whole game. And once you see it, you cannot unsee it. Let me give you the actual numbers, because the numbers are genuinely shocking when you put them side by side. In 1990, despite mortgage rates hovering between 9 and 10%, the median home price was just $96,800 against a median household income of $32,000. Do the math. That's a price-to-income ratio of about 3.1. In 2025, the median American home costs $416,900. 5 times the median annual household income of $83,150. 3.1 in 1990, 5.0 in 2025. Now here's the part that really stings. Incomes would have to jump by 58% to get back to the 3.1 home price to income ratio that home buyers enjoyed in 1990. 58%. Not a raise. Not a promotion, a systemic, across-the-board 58% increase in what people earn before we're even back to where things were in the era of dial-up internet and Blockbuster memberships. And the thing is, this didn't happen overnight. During millennials' peak home buying years from 2015 to 2025, housing affordability reached historic lows, with median home prices increasing 53% from 2020 to 2024 alone, while wage growth failed to keep pace with housing cost increases. 53% in 4 years. Your salary did not go up 53% in 4 years. My salary did not go up 53% in 4 years, except for people who owned a house. That is the conveyor belt, and it is running. Now, let me be precise about something, because this is where most people get the analysis wrong. People think the problem is that houses are expensive. That is not the problem. The problem is that houses are expensive and they are the primary vehicle for wealth accumulation for the middle class. Those two things together, that's the issue. If housing was expensive and there was another equally accessible, equally leveraged, equally tax-advantaged way to build generational wealth, we wouldn't be having this conversation. But there isn't one. The system was built around homeownership. The tax code rewards it. The banking system finances it at favorable rates. The culture glorifies it. And then when the entry price gets too high for a generation to step in, that generation doesn't just miss out on a house. They miss out on the entire compounding mechanism that previous generations used to build wealth. You think the problem is rent, but actually the problem is what rent prevents. Let me explain that carefully. Imagine two people, call them Marco and Tom, same age, same income. $62,000 a year. In 2015, Marco manages to buy a modest home for $225,000. He puts 10% down, $22,500, and gets a mortgage at around 3.75%. His monthly payment is about $940. Tom cannot come up with the down payment at the same time. He keeps renting at $1,400 a month. He's paying more per month than Marco. He's also building zero equity, zero. Every dollar goes to his landlord's balance sheet, not his own. Fast forward to 2025, Marco's house is worth $400,000. His mortgage balance is down to around $160,000. He has $240,000 in equity, not counting any payments he's made, just pure paper appreciation. He didn't do anything clever, he didn't trade stocks, he just held the belt. Tom spent a decade and a half renting. He paid roughly $252,000 in rent. He has nothing to show for it in terms of net worth. He's now trying to buy his first home in a market where prices are double what they were when Marco bought. Same income, same era. Completely different trajectories. That is not a story about discipline. That is a story about who got on the conveyor belt first. Here's what makes this genuinely interesting to me from a systems perspective. By age 30, 55% of the silent generation owned homes compared to 48% of baby boomers, 42% of Gen Xers, and just 33% of millennials. Each consecutive generation has owned less at the same age. Not because people got lazier, not because ambition evaporated, but because the math got incrementally worse each time. And the thing is, the compounding effect of being late to the conveyor belt doesn't just affect you. It affects your kids. It affects what you can leave behind. Late homeownership entry means fewer years of equity building before retirement, potentially requiring more aggressive retirement savings to compensate. You are not just late to the asset, you are late to the compounding. And compounding doesn't wait. This is what people mean when they talk about generational wealth. And they usually frame it wrong. They frame it as rich families pass money to their kids. But most of the time, it's not direct cash transfer. It's the compounding effect of having entered the wealth machine early, having assets appreciate while you sleep, and then being in a position to help your kids with down payments, tuition, or just time they don't have to spend working extra jobs to cover rent. The kid whose parents own their home outright at 65 has options the other kid doesn't. Not because anyone handed him anything, because the machine ran in his favor for 30 years. Let me give you a comedic interlude here because I want to illustrate something. Picture a guy, let's call him Dave, who bought a house in 2019 for $300,000. By 2023, it's worth $500,000. He did absolutely nothing. He watched TV, he ate cereal, he argued with his HOA about his fence height. He gained $200,000 in net worth. He now posts LinkedIn content about the importance of hard work and discipline. Dave is not the villain. Dave is just the guy who happened to grab something off the belt at the right time. But Dave's advice is useless to you because his advice assumes you are standing in front of the same belt he was standing in front of. You are not. Now, here's where the analysis gets more uncomfortable, and I think this is the part most conversations skip over entirely. 46% of homes purchased in 2024 were by those aged 60 and over. Nearly half of all home purchases in this country are being made by people who already have accumulated wealth. People who are using equity from a previous home or retirement funds or inheritance to buy the next asset. They are not first-time buyers. They are not young people trying to enter the market. They are people already inside the machine buying more of the machine. The share of first-time home buyers plummeted to a record low of 21% in 2025. 21%. 1 in 5 buyers. That used to be closer to 40%. The market that was designed partly as an entry point for young families has become a playground for people with existing capital. And that's not a conspiracy, it's just how markets work when prices rise faster than incomes. Existing asset holders consolidate, new entrants struggle, the belt gets faster for people already on it and slower for people trying to step on. Buyers still need to earn $112,000 to afford the median priced home in the US, roughly $25,000 more than the median US income. Let that land for a second. The median American needs a raise of $25,000 just to afford the median American home. That's not a marginal gap. That's not cut the avocado toast. That is a structural mismatch between what the economy pays most people and what the asset market demands of them. If you're watching this and finding yourself connecting with what I'm describing, this channel is where I document how the real financial game works. Not how it's supposed to work, not how your parents described it, but how it actually functions. Subscribe if you want to stay in the loop. I drop these regularly and I don't waste your time. Now I want to talk about something that I think gets almost zero attention in this conversation, and that's the role of housing supply, or more accurately, the role of intentional housing scarcity in keeping the belt running fast. The US currently faces a deficit of over 4 million homes according to Realtor.com. A supply gap that continues to prop up high home prices even as wages slowly recover. 4 million homes. That is not a rounding error. That is a structural undersupply that has been building for over a decade. And here's the thing about structural undersupply. It doesn't happen by accident in a country this large, this wealthy, and this capable of building things. It happens because the incentives for the people who make zoning decisions point in a particular direction. Think about who shows up to zoning meetings. Who cares deeply about what gets built in a neighborhood? Homeowners. People who have already bought in, people whose net worth is directly tied to the value of the homes around them. Every new apartment building is, from their perspective, potential downward pressure on their asset. So they show up, they speak, they vote. And the politicians who want to stay in office listen to the people who show up. This is not malice, this is incentive alignment. Homeowners have a rational incentive to restrict supply. Renters have a diffuse, hard-to-organize incentive to increase it. The machine rewards homeowners with political power because political power is correlated with showing up, and showing up is correlated with having something at stake. When your primary asset appreciates only if supply stays constrained, you fight to constrain supply. The result is 4 million missing homes. The result is a belt that keeps running fast. The result is that the gap between people who are on the conveyor belt and people who are not keeps widening, not because of hard work or lack of it, but because of the structural incentive to keep it exactly that way. Attack the incentive, not the individual. I want to now give you what I think of as the 4 traps, the 4 mental models that keep people stuck, financially speaking, in this environment. Because the housing crisis doesn't just price people out of houses, it distorts how people think about money entirely. Trap 1. The waiting trap. This is the belief that if you just wait long enough, prices will correct and you'll be able to buy at a reasonable level. Prices might cool, rates might drop, but here's what happens during the wait. You keep renting. And every month you rent, someone else is building equity you are not building. The person who waited 5 years to time the market on housing usually discovers that even if prices drop 10% during that time, the person who bought 5 years ago is still $200,000 ahead in equity. You cannot time your way out of an asset that compounds continuously. Trap 2. The debt shame trap. This is the belief usually inherited from parents or grandparents who lived through very different economic conditions that all debt is bad and that you should save up and pay cash for everything. Cash for a house in 2026. In most major cities, I'll wait. The people who are building wealth in this environment are using leverage correctly. They are borrowing to buy appreciating assets. They are using other people's money in the form of a mortgage to hold a position in a market that historically increases in value. Their equity grows, their loan balance shrinks. Time does the work. The person refusing debt on principle is often refusing to participate in the only game where leverage is legally, tax advantaged, and accessible to normal people. Trap 3. The location loyalty trap. This is staying in a city that is actively hostile to your wealth building because you grew up there, because your friends are there, because you identify with the culture. I get it. I understand the pull. But the market does not care about your identity. The millennial homeownership rate is 52% in non-metropolitan parts of the country, but just 35% in the nation's largest urban markets. That's a 17 percentage point gap. Geographic arbitrage, moving to a lower cost area to build capital faster, then potentially returning later with more assets, is one of the few remaining levers that individuals actually control in this environment. Trap 4, the income optimization trap. This is the belief that the solution to the affordability crisis is to earn more. Yes, earn more, always earn more. But earning more without a plan for what the money does after you earn it is just running the treadmill faster. The guy earning $90,000 in San Francisco and renting is often worth less at 35 than the guy earning $50,000 in a mid-sized city who bought a house at 27. The income is not the variable. The deployment of the income is the variable. Let me walk you through a mini case study because I want this to be concrete rather than abstract. Picture two guys, call them Alex and Jordan, both 25, both earning $58,000 a year. They start from the same place. Alex lives in a major coastal city. Rent is $2,100 a month. After taxes and rent and basic expenses, he saves about $400 a month. It would take him about 15 years to save a 20% down payment on a medium-priced home in his city at current appreciation rates, meaning by the time he saves enough, the house costs more than his savings can cover. He stays in the cycle. Jordan looks at the numbers differently. He moves to a mid-sized city in the Midwest. Same income, but his rent is $900 a month. After taxes and rent and basic expenses, he saves about $1,400 a month. In 2 years, he has around $33,600 saved. He buys a house at $160,000, puts 20% down, $32,000, and has a mortgage payment of around $680. His housing costs just dropped by over $200 a month compared to what he was paying in rent. He starts building equity from month 1. 5 years later, his house is worth $200,000. His mortgage balance is around $120,000. He has $80,000 in equity, plus his savings rate is now higher than it was when he was renting because his housing cost is lower. He starts investing the difference, $1,200 a month, into index funds. By 35, Jordan has a house with significant equity in an investment portfolio that has been compounding for a decade. He hasn't done anything exotic, he just moved, bought early, and let time work. Alex spent the same 10 years in the same apartment. His rent went up every year. He is smart, he is disciplined, he is working hard. But he is not building wealth at the same rate because he is not on the conveyor belt. He is watching it from the platform. This is not a story about virtue. Jordan didn't make better life choices in some spiritual sense. He just understood that the machine rewards certain inputs and punishes others, and he aligned himself with the inputs that the machine rewards. Now, obviously, not everyone can just move. People have families, caregivers, specific jobs. I'm not being naive about that. The point isn't just move. The point is that geography is one of the few variables individuals can actually control in a system that otherwise controls them. It's worth calculating whether the sacrifice is worth the outcome. Most people never even run the numbers. There's something worth saying about the psychological side of all this, because I think it's easy to read the data and go into either rage or despair, and neither of those states is useful. The emotional reaction most people have to this information falls into 3 categories. Category 1, denial. It's fine, I'll figure it out, my generation is different. This is not a strategy, this is a coping mechanism. Category 2, anger at the wrong target. Blaming boomers, blaming politicians, blaming landlords, blaming immigrants, blaming whoever the algorithm has told you to be angry at this week. These targets might be partially relevant in some narrow analytical sense, but anger at a demographic doesn't put you on the conveyor belt. Understanding why the machine works the way it does and then positioning yourself within it or adjacent to it, that's the only lever you actually have. Category 3, paralysis. The system is rigged. Nothing I do matters. I'll just spend my money on things that make me happy right now. I understand this emotionally. I really do. Nihilism is tempting when the math looks this bad. But this is also not a strategy. It is surrender. The 4th option, the one that almost nobody chooses because it's the least emotionally satisfying in the short term, is clarity. You look at the machine, you understand how it works. You stop expecting it to be fair, and then you figure out, given these exact conditions, what set of moves produces the best outcome for you specifically? Not your friend, not some hypothetical average person, you. Here's the second comedic cutaway, and I promise it's relevant. Imagine an older relative at a family dinner telling you, Back in my day, we just saved up and bought a house. It wasn't that complicated. Back in your day, the house cost less than 3 times your annual income. The down payment was achievable in 2 or 3 years of modest savings. The mortgage rate was high, but the principal was small. And you got a pension from your employer, so you didn't have to compete your homeownership savings against retirement savings simultaneously. Yeah, but we worked hard. I know you did. And I am not saying you didn't. I'm saying the difficulty was different. The same amount of work, the same discipline, the same savings rate produces a fundamentally different outcome in 2026 than it did in 1990. Not because people are weaker, because the math changed. You wouldn't tell someone trying to climb a ladder that's now twice as tall to just climb harder. You'd say the ladder got taller. That's it. That's the observation. Let me get into something that I think is the most counterintuitive part of this whole conversation. And this is the point where most people's analysis completely stops. The housing affordability crisis is real. The conveyor belt is running faster than most people can keep up with. All of that is true, but here's the part that doesn't get said enough. The people who will build wealth in this environment are probably not going to do it the same way their parents did. Your parents built wealth primarily through one lever: own a home, let it appreciate, retire. That was a complete strategy in a different environment. It is a partial strategy now, because even if you manage to buy a house, the appreciation rates in most markets going forward are unlikely to replicate what happened between 2000 and 2025. That was a specific historical moment. Low interest rates, limited supply, massive demographic demand, and pandemic-era distortion. That specific combination is probably not repeating. So what actually works now? Not one lever, multiple levers stacked. The first lever is still real estate, but not the way people think about it. The primary residence is a store of value and a hedge against rent inflation. It is not the most efficient wealth-building vehicle in isolation. If you can buy one, but don't confuse buying a home with investing. They overlap, but they are not the same thing. The second lever is ownership of assets that produce cash flow or appreciate beyond inflation. Index funds, businesses, fractional real estate, whatever form makes sense for your situation. The 401k your employer offers is the most underused wealth-building tool for people under 35. And I mean that in a very specific way. Employer matching is a guaranteed immediate return on your contribution. If your employer matches 50 cents on the dollar up to 6% of your salary and you are not contributing at least 6%, you are leaving guaranteed money on the table, not potential money. Guaranteed money, declining to take guaranteed money, is a systems thinking failure, not a discipline failure. The third lever, and this is the one I think about the most, is income multiplication. Not just earning more, but building income sources that scale beyond your time. One job, one salary, one economic exposure is a fragile system. One job plus a side income that compounds and potentially scales is a more robust system. I run YouTube channels. I know what it takes to build something on the side. It is not glamorous for a long time. It is months of work before you see meaningful returns. But an income stream that generates money while you sleep is qualitatively different from a salary, which stops the moment you stop showing up. None of these levers are new. None of them are secret. But the combination, assets plus invested cash flow plus scalable income, is how you build wealth when the primary traditional path has been structurally compromised. Let me return to where we started. My parents owned a home at 25. I cannot afford rent at 26. At age 28, 38.3% of Gen Z owned their home in 2025, compared to 42.5% of Gen Xers when they were 28 and 44.4% of baby boomers at the same age. The median age for first-time homebuyers hit a historic high of 40 in 2025. While boomers faced high rates, they bought lower-priced homes, resulting in manageable monthly payments. Millennials and Gen Z faced the double challenge of high prices and recently elevated rates, creating the worst affordability conditions in generations. So is the gap between my parents' experience and mine a character flaw? Is it a discipline problem? Is it an avocado problem? No. It is a structural problem. A conveyor belt problem. A machine that was calibrated for one set of conditions and is now running under completely different ones, producing completely different outcomes, while still telling everyone to use the same strategy. The insight I want you to leave with is not the system is unfair, feel bad about it. The insight is understanding why the system is producing these outcomes is the prerequisite to doing anything useful about it. If you think the problem is discipline, you will spend your energy on habits and suffer the same outcome. If you think the problem is income, you will chase raises and never deploy the money correctly. If you think the problem is luck, you will do nothing and confirm your own prediction. But if you understand that the system rewards specific inputs, early asset ownership, leverage used correctly, geographic flexibility, scalable income, then you can start running the inputs that the system rewards, regardless of what the social script says you're supposed to do. Here are 3 concrete, non-generic takeaways. The first one is this: calculate your personal price to income ratio right now. Look at the median home price in your city. Divide it by your annual income. If that number is above 5, you are living in a market where the belt is moving faster than you can realistically keep up with on a median income. That is not a judgment, that is information. Information you can use to decide whether to stay and build a different strategy or redirect your energy to a market where the ratio is more manageable. Say, a city where homes are still priced at 2 to 3 times the median local income. The second one is this: treat your down payment like a startup runway. The standard advice is to save 20% so you avoid private mortgage insurance. That's fine advice. But the more important mental model is to think of your down payment not as a prerequisite for a house, but as your initial equity stake in an asset that compounds. This changes how you prioritize it. It moves it from something I'm supposed to do eventually to the single most high leverage financial move I can make right now. 3 to 5% down is possible in many markets. It costs you PMI. That is a known cost. The alternative cost is zero equity accumulation for however long it takes you to get to 20%. Run both scenarios on paper. The numbers usually make the case better than I can. The third one is this: stop treating your labor income and your wealth strategy as the same thing. Your salary is not your wealth. Your salary is the raw material. Wealth is what you build with it when you deploy it into assets that appreciate, compound, and generate returns beyond your direct time investment. The person earning $100,000 a year with no assets is running a financial treadmill. The person earning $50,000 a year with an appreciating asset and invested savings is building a position that compounds over time. Most people spend their entire lives optimizing the input, the salary, without building the mechanism that converts the input into lasting wealth. Build the mechanism. The conveyor belt is real. It's running. And it's running faster for people already on it than for people trying to step onto it. That's not going to change through motivation, through hustle culture, through working harder at the wrong problem. What changes it is understanding the machine clearly enough to make decisions the machine rewards, rather than decisions that feel virtuous, but produce no output. Subscribe if this is the kind of thinking you want more of. That's it.